So in 1969, the Germans still thought that the Poles were inferior, and the Poles still thought that the Germans were Nazis. Despite the image of a fraternal communist brotherhood that Moscow sought to portray, it turns out it was not all harmonious within the Warsaw Pact. Those nations who hated each other before World War II, when World War II happened, and continued to hate each other on afterwards. Case in point, the Polish army and the reports on East German troops conducting maneuvers on Polish territory during the Warsaw Pact or their Nice 69 exercise in October 1969. The East German army behaved more like Hitler's army, according to a report, an excerpt which is included in the book A Cardboard Castle, An Inside History of the Warsaw Pact from 1951 to 1991. That the report was written by the Poles is obvious from the first paragraph of the excerpt, which is stated that the attitudes of the NVA GDR or the East German National People's Army were determined by the guilty feelings caused by the previous historical period. Unfortunately for the Poles, though, that guilt did not last very long. The report goes on to note that during the meetings between East Germans and Polish officers, the Germans boasted for their superior economic policies and higher standards of living, which they attribute to the industriousness of the German nation. Displayed excessive levels of self-confidence, particularly by overestimating their own and underestimating other organizational skills, the Polish army noted. For anyone who knows anything about the German military from 1933 to 1945, they view Slavs and Eastern Europeans as lazy and dim-witted, and unsemensch. This is definitely and will definitely sound familiar in 1969. It gets better though. The Poles complained that the East Germans enjoyed showing sweets to the children and photographing them. Showing sweets to the children and photographing these youngsters while they picked up the sweets, which caused unpleasant feedback and reminiscence among the civilians. Keep in mind that in 1969, any Pole over the age of 35 would have memories of a German invasion and even occupation, and the hunger of the warriors, while Germany looted the nation, the executions, and the forced labor of the Poles and Eastern Europeans in the Slavs. After 1945, the Soviets redrew Poland's borders, with the Soviet Union annexing a swath of eastern Poland and then compensating Poland with a swath of eastern Germany. During official meetings, NVA GDR officers making presentations have never used phrases that address Poland's historical title to its western and northern lands. There is no doubt that this is a result of many years of subjugating NVA GDR soldiers during political training to the theory that Hitler lost these territories with his fascist incompetence. One gets the sense from reading the Polish reports that East Germany would not have tried to at least recapture some of this land. Indeed, the Germans seem to behave like they own Poland. In the city of Poznan, East German soldiers, under the influence of alcohol, disgusted people walking on the streets of the city. Meanwhile, a Colonel Leisner, deputy commander of the 9th Armored Division of the NVA GDR, after binge drinking in the town of Harshakov, and even missing his shoes and uniform, attempted to break into the room of a Soviet typist, which required some intervention. Not all incidents ended so comically though. The Polish army even reports and cited a case where an East German naval petty officer raped a Polish woman. To be fair, strained relations between allies are nothing new, and most allies try to get something out of it anyway. The ugly American has become the symbol for the American insensitivity in foreign lands. British civilians complained that American soldiers stationed in Britain during World War II were overpaid, oversexed, and over here. That sounded more Australian. Overpaid, oversexed, and over here. South Vietnamese civilians resented crude behavior by the US servicemen, and the Okinawans still wish that US bases on the island would just go away. Soviet occupation troops did not always endure themselves to the locals of Eastern Europe, while Afghan soldiers occasionally shot the US counterparts in the back, figuratively and even literally. Nevertheless, the fact is that in Polish eyes, the Germans of 1969 behaved like the goose-stepping stormtroopers of 1939, which makes one wonder how these two Warsaw Pact allies would have cooperated with each other, even under the watchful eyes of the Soviets. It is not hard to imagine that the East German regiment failing to support its Polish comrades, or that the Polish unit that accidentally lobbed a few shells at the German positions. Perhaps the Soviets wouldn't have minded as much. Better the Germans and Poles shoot at each other than shoot at the Russians. Am I right? Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed and learn something.